Hello, everyone. This is Evan Blackwell here today with Sarah Scott. We're back from our summer hiatus and ready to start a new season of Behind the Byline. Today, we're going to get back into the world of sports and sports writing. Our guest has been a well-known sports columnist at the Oklahoman newspaper in Oklahoma City since 1999. She's also a past president and chair of the board for the Association for Women in Sports Media. She's also a graduate of the University of Kansas, where she was once a co-worker on the student newspaper with yours truly. She's joining us today to talk about her career, as well as the challenges young women can face pursuing a career in sports journalism. Jenni Carlson, welcome to Behind the Byline.
Thanks. So good to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time for a conversation with us today. So, Jenni, let's just, to kind of get started with this, take us back. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you grew up, how you kind of figured out when you were young that you wanted to get into the journalism business.
So I grew up in small town Kansas. Clay Center is my hometown, about 4,000, 5,000 people. So I graduated with, I think we were a class of 98, which is pretty common for our school. But growing up, I was interested in sports, but I didn't really think that my career would ultimately revolve around sports. I thought for a long time I might become a teacher or something along those lines. I really loved school and education and all of that. So it really wasn't until I was in high school that I had a chance to do student journalism, do electives with our yearbook class and our newspaper class. And I fell in love with it. I loved the teamwork aspect of journalism. And, even though I'd read newspapers and sports sections and those sorts of things, didn't really dawn on me until that point that it was something I might want to do professionally. So it really wasn't until then that I thought, I think sports writing might be what I would like to do. And so that was when I decided to pursue it. And as much as I love sports growing up, it really wasn't until I think it was my junior year of high school that I had that student media experience that my brain kind of realized that those two things could combine, and I could write and do sports and make that a career. So like I said, I kind of came late to the game, but that was when it all came together for me.
And were there any sports in particular you were interested in?
Growing up, we pretty much watched and cared about everything that was happening in our town. That was, it was high school football, it was high school basketball, it was summertime baseball. We watched pretty much everything on TV. My family did. My parents were very much sports nuts. My dad refereed high school basketball games and coached some baseball. My mom, she kind of grew up in the pre-Title IX era, so she didn't have a ton of sports offerings per se when she was growing up. It's not like she played, but she loved sports. I think grew up very similar to my upbringing in terms of always going to games, always watching on TV if there were opportunities to see games. So she knew as much about sports as anybody. So I grew up being around it all the time. And it was really every sport. So, while football games were sort of a community event, and I loved that part of Friday nights in my hometown, basketball games, I thought it was always cool, the energy in a high school gym when a game was going on. So I don't know. There wasn't really any one sport that I thought, boy, I love covering this. I guess maybe that's why ultimately I never became a beat writer. I've never covered just one team at a time. That's never been what I've done. I've always covered a lot of different sports, whether it was when I was covering high schools or being a columnist, doing more enterprise writing along the way. I've pretty much always dabbled in different sports, and maybe that's because I could never pick one that I liked better than the others.
You mentioned, when you were in high school, you worked on the yearbook and the newspaper.
Right,
Was
yeah.
that right? And that's when you kind of felt like you kind of fell in love with when scholastic journalism. What were some of the lessons you learned back in those days that you kind of still take to heart now?
Yeah, I think I appreciated the fact that in my small town, we were not doing daily newspaper journalism like it's done, in cities that are bigger or anything like that. So I had an understanding that, it was definitely a version of daily journalism, but it wasn't like it would be out in the world, I guess you could say. So that was something I understood, but at the same time, I go back to that feeling of really enjoying that team aspect of things because I remember as with most student media, you have people that are taking pictures. Nowadays, I'm sure it's video, some of those sorts of things, but the visual side of things, we had people that were involved with the layout and the design and the computer side of things. Even back in my olden days, we were actually designing on the computer, so I'm not that old. But I just remember thinking that I could have potentially learned how to do those things, but that seemed like really far out from from what I knew, and what I felt comfortable and passionate about, which was talking to people, writing stories, telling stories. So, I think that was, I've always appreciated the fact that, there are people that I work with on a daily basis that are experts in what they do in a way that I am not. And while they have an idea what my job is like, and I have an idea what their job is like, I don't know all the ins and outs. So I think it's made for a healthy approach and view of my newsroom always. That I've always had a deep appreciation for our visual folks, our people that were designing or copy editing or writing headlines, or just any number of things that I felt like they brought a special talent and passion to what they were doing. And I've always appreciated that. And so I think as I've gone on in my career, I've always tried to really not only appreciate them and see them as equals in my co-working space, but also to I'm always reminding, say, a photographer that might go out, or a videographer might go out with me on an assignment. I'm always saying, if you see something, if you think of a question that I haven't thought of, or you want to jump in and ask something, don't hesitate. I figure that if we're out reporting a story and they're somewhere I'm not, if they hear something or see something, they can be reporters. They can help me with that reporting in the same way that, if I thought, what about going into the locker room at halftime with this high school team? What possibilities could exist there? We start talking about that in a collaborative way. I think that's always been one of the things that I've leaned on, and I've wanted to ask coworkers to be a part of that storytelling with me. So that definitely has some roots back in those early days when it dawned on me that we were going to put out this yearbook, or we were going to put out this newspaper, and I was going to have to lean on other people to bring their expertise and their passions to the table. And I still do that on a daily basis with my job now.
So you're a columnist, right? Do you enjoy the columnist at a newspaper, especially the size of the one you're at? You're kind of in that spotlight. Do you enjoy being in the spotlight, as far as like, you'll write things, or any good columnist will write things that from time to time is gonna, maybe really invoke a strong reaction in readers?
Sure.
Is that something that you kind of relish?
Do I enjoy making people mad, I think is what you're asking about.
Right.
Which, yeah, I think that's part of the job, as a columnist. We talk a lot in our sports department at the Oklahoman about driving the conversation. We want all of our stories, whether columns or byline stories, to really be the conversation driver in our community. We want to lead the way with Oklahoma football coverage, Oklahoma State football coverage, Thunder basketball coverage, whatever it is. We want to write things and produce content that gets people talking. We want to be the thing that the sports talk radio is talking about, and the new, the TV stations are chasing after those stories. So I think that that's always in the forefront of our mind, is to be conversation drivers. And so, yeah, I definitely am trying to write things that people can't get anywhere else. And lots of times I'm covering a game that dozens of other writers are attending, so we're all going to write about the same game. So then it comes down to, what perspective can I bring that might be different? And sometimes maybe it's not the most popular opinion. Sometimes you watch a team win a game and the performance is underwhelming, and so while some people might write, this is a win and it's a good thing, maybe there's reason to bring up what's not really positive about that win. So I think those are times that you have to be willing. I mean, if you don't believe it, I've always thought
Right.
that anytime you were trying to force an opinion, it never works, because people see through that pretty quickly, and it just doesn't feel comfortable or good for you writing it that way. But if you have a feeling that there's something else amiss in a good, what most people might see as a good situation, or vice versa. If you think there's good in what might be perceived as a bad situation, sometimes you have to step out and bring up those differing viewpoints, which sometimes doesn't work out. Sometimes you'll write that, boy, this win was nice to have, but there's a problem with X, Y, and Z. And who knows, maybe the very next time the team plays, X, Y, and Z is completely vanished. They fixed it, and you look like an idiot. But that's kind of part of the challenge. That's and it's just, you've got to roll with it. I think having a thick skin as a columnist is absolutely necessary. I've had conversations with coworkers who've been doing the job for a while, and I remember one in particular with a friend of mine who's no longer in newspapers, but she talked about, one day she told me, she got this email, and it was talking about, I don't even remember what the subject was, but basically she just felt terrible about it. And what the person had said made her feel terrible. And she showed it to me. And I was, I think I was fairly, conciliatory, or, sympathetic towards what she had received. But in my head, I thought, boy, if you saw my email, you would you would really want to crawl under your desk. So I mean, I think that especially sports, which
Right.
I understand that health and education and government are, those sorts of topics are way more important than sports and the teams and the wins and the losses. I get that, but when it comes to people being passionate about stuff, sports takes it to another level. So people can really fly off the handle, almost unexpectedly sometimes. So you got to be ready for that. And
Oh, yeah.
I've pretty much, I mean, I don't have, complete body armor at this point, but it's pretty close. I can handle pretty much anything, I guess, these days.
Nice. And do you feel like, being a female sports columnist, you have to have, thicker skin than your male peers?
Yeah, that's probably true. Obviously I've never walked a day, and I've never been a male sports columnist, put it that way. So I don't know what it's like to live in those shoes. So I do think that for women in sports, I think a lot of what you have to deal with. I mean, yes, there is the external. There are critics out there who are quick to get all over you, when maybe if the same thing was done by one of the men in the business, it wouldn't nearly be as quickly scrutinized, as harshly scrutinized. I think that that's part of it. There's definitely that. I don't think it's quite as bad as it used to be. I'm not going to sit here and say that I have, this plight that is, so bad. I mean, I think about, women who were first in the industry. I mean, real honest to goodness trailblazers, women like Leslie Visser and Christine Brennan, these women who are, were the only women, not only in their newsroom on the sports department, but in the press box, anywhere you looked, there was no other woman doing what they did. And so I think that today, that has changed a lot. So I don't see it necessarily as harsh as that. But I do think that there's an internal pressure, even as we've seen the number of women increase in sports writing and sports media in general, I think that there's definitely that sense for me that I want to do a good job regardless. I'm wired that way. But I also think there's a feeling of wanting to make sure that I do the best and highest quality work I can, because I want other women to have a chance to become sports columnists, not only in Oklahoma City, but in New York City, in LA, in all locations. I want to do a good job so that maybe if there's an opportunity out there, maybe maybe the person who would be hiring isn't necessarily thinking specifically of me, but they know that good work is being done by women who are sports columnists. And right now, at major metropolitan daily newspapers, there are very few of us still. So I do think that there is a bit of an internal pressure to say, I want to do a good job. I want to set a high standard so that the bar, is not raised even higher for other women who might follow after me, or want to get into a similar line. I think it's improving. I think that where it used to be that women in sports media were, you were not only fighting external critics, but you were fighting internal critics, whether that was, people who were hiring and thinking, well, woman can't do this job, or coworkers who looked at women in their sports departments and said, well, they can't do this job. I think that I'm not naive enough to think it's gone, but I do think it's less than it's ever been before, and that's really great. I mean, we have on our staff here over the last 10 years, we've had a woman who has covered Oklahoma football, who's covered Oklahoma State football. We have a woman currently who's covering as one of our Thunder writers. So we've had women come in and really take some of the most high profile jobs that we have in our sports department and do a great job with them. The women that we've lost are now, one of them's covering the NBA and one of them's covering the NFL. And so we feel like that they've taken the opportunities and really accelerated it in their careers. So we're super excited about that, but also excited about the fact that we continue to be able to have women come in and get opportunities to show their skills, to be part of our team, and really enhance what we're doing. I think, and I've seen, it's been great to see as we've had different candidate diversity, come in and be brought in, part of the team, teammates, just really accepted, and that's been such fun to see. I really love that anytime that we've got somebody new coming in, and to see how they are embraced right away.
Jenni, how do you handle social media specifically? It's been many years. I've been out of the game of being a sports writer, but I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and I know sometimes Twitter to me just seems like it can be a really toxic place, especially for women that work in sports media. I've seen things out there that just make my blood boil, and it's it's not even involving me, it's not even directed at me.
Right.
How do you handle social media specifically?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't know if there's any perfect answer for handling social media, because on one hand, it's so powerful, and if harnessed the right way, it can be a huge advantage and benefit to what you do. So I think that's the first thing. And on the other hand, it's obviously it's regulated, but in ways that don't always cover some of what you're talking about, Evan, with the ugliness of it. It doesn't always get filtered out, and we all know that. So I think it's
Right.
important to really think about how do I want to try to use social media, use it to my advantage even. What I've done, and again, I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but what I've done is I have a Facebook page that is my Facebook page, and then our sports department has set up individual Facebook pages for our Oklahoma coverage, for our Oklahoma State coverage, Thunder coverage, and then myself and our other columnists each have a page. And those are, while we can post on them, they are maintained by some of our sports editors. So as far as content that goes up there. So I've really stayed out of that one. I will do, if they need me to do something, I'll do it, but it's not something I do on a daily basis. My personal Facebook page, I've kept it that I just friend people that I'm actually friends with, which, is a foreign concept to some people because, some people get, those friend requests and it's an automatic yes. And if I don't look at that friend request and automatically know who that person is, that's not going to be an accepted friend request. So that's the page where I post, what I think are cute pictures of my daughter and, crazy musings about why am I running in the heat because I'm just going to pass out. It's all the sorts of stuff that's just me, random stuff that I put up there. So I've really kept that as, people that I know, family, friends, that sort of thing. The Twitter, I've always left, my Twitter's always been open. It's not locked. You don't have to request for me to follow it or for you to follow me or me to follow you, whatever the follow lock is. But that is, I see that as, more my professional persona, whereas my Facebook page is more my private side. So while I do post occasional personal stuff on Twitter as a sort of almost like I want to make sure that I'm, giving readers or people that would just be following me on Twitter for my sports stuff, just give them a little sense of who I am. I'm not going to reveal a bunch of personal information. I'm not going to tell them, where my daughter goes to school or what, my husband, where he works or anything like that. All of that stays off my Twitter page. But I do post occasional, just like if I think something's funny or even if it's not related to our local sports scene, I might retweet it and, make a comment about it or whatever. But that I've pretty much left to be where I post, I'm sharing stuff and that sort of thing. But I also know it's important to do that on Facebook, which, as I mentioned, even though that Facebook page is sort of my private stuff, if I've done something that I'm proud of, I'm going to share it on Facebook. Our podcasts, we're really making a push here currently to do more and more podcasts. And so I've been pushing those every once in a while. I push columns that I write that I think, people might be interested beyond just, local fans off a game or something like that. So I do think that if, people are my friends and my family, they may want to see some of my work. I'm not going to bombard them with all sorts of stuff. But if I think it's important enough that, they might be interested in reading it. And if it's my work or somebody else's work on our staff, I'll oftentimes share those sort of those things that go beyond just the sports that are more, sort of, the stuff that is universal in a lot of ways, those stories that, talk about family or friendship or, overcoming those sorts of things, I think can, resonate with people, whether you're a fan of some team here or not. So I'll share those from time to time as well. But yeah, I think I've kind of put those lines of, demarcation on my social media. And then when it comes to like, what do you do when people respond to you on social media? I'm on TweetDeck. That's how I consume Twitter, if you will. And I have a responses column. And, sometimes, obviously, there are times when I talk about leveraging, I'll use Twitter to try to come up with, almost like a crowdsourcing. If I'm looking for fans that, maybe they're season ticket holders to a team, and I want to, write about an issue or, the cost of the tickets or the, game times, whether that's become a problem for season ticket holders, some issue that's out there. Sometimes I'll use Twitter as a crowdsource. And so obviously I want to pay attention then, but I never feel like I have to respond. And I think maybe that's a generational thing, because I know I have a lot of younger coworkers who feel, I've never asked them this, but I know by how they respond, they basically respond to everything. And I don't feel like I have to respond to everything, because, some stuff
right.
is, it's gibberish. Some stuff it's demeaning. Some stuff it's, not really that important. Especially during a game, if I'm trying to, I've backed off this a little bit, but I used to keep a pretty, what I thought was robust conversation going on during games with people. And if people wanted to converse, I was happy to do that. But then, if somebody wanted to bring up some issue from 5 years ago, or, talk about, a different game or a different team or a different sport, it's just like, that's not the time for that conversation. And that's not what we're using this for. So I never felt like it was you've got to engage with people just because they clearly want to engage with you. I figure I still list my email and my direct line phone number in the newsroom with my column every day. So if somebody wants to engage in a one-on-one type of situation, there are definitely ways to achieve that. Lots of times I think if somebody's trying to do something, inciting on Twitter, I think it's a lot of time very much about, what kind of response can I get? What kind of, strength can I show to my other friends on Twitter? I'm not really about feeding that. So again, I think if somebody wants to engage one-on-one, there are ways to do that. And lots of times that's not what people want. They don't want the one-on-one conversation. They want the, splash of, well, if I can get this sports columnist to say something that I can then retweet and other people will see and they'll look like a moron, then, yay me. So I'm not gonna feed that, and I'm not gonna waste my time with that. I don't know if I've ever blocked anybody. I'm not a blocker on Twitter, but I will mute people because if I don't think I need to see them, then I'm more than happy to mute. But I don't think I've blocked anybody. I don't hold me to that 100%. I can't be certain. Sometimes I do this stuff during games and it's late and I'm tired and I can't remember. But mute is a great function on Twitter. I'll just say that.
Yeah. How often do you get asked to talk about Mike Gundy and the rant?
Yeah, even though it's been over a decade ago, which is hard to believe. Yeah, it's not, not very often, but on a somewhat regular basis. I was asked about it just earlier this week, actually. So how about that?
Just because a lot of our listeners probably don't know the full story, do you mind briefly just explaining the backstory? Not in great detail, but
Sure. Yeah. Basically, it boils down to I wrote a column on the day of a game about Oklahoma State football. They were changing quarterbacks, or at least it appeared that they were changing quarterbacks, but weren't actually ready to admit why they were changing quarterbacks. And so we attempted through a column that I wrote. And when I say we, I very much collaborated with beat writers who covered the team, who, again, more eyes, more ears, more knowledge. I tapped into that and wrote a column that tried to explain why they were making this quarterback change. The head coach, Mike Gundy, who is still the head coach, did not like, I guess. I don't exactly know what he didn't like. At the heart, I don't know what he didn't like, but he did not like it. And in his post-game press conference, after a huge win, they had just won a big game. He basically spent, I think it was somewhere in the 2.5 to 3 minute range, just basically lambasting what I'd written, me, my editors, our newspaper, on and on and on. And that was his post game. He never answered any questions. He just came in, began ranting and raving, and then after about 3 minutes, he walked out.
Are you kidding me? Where are we at in society today? Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40! I'm not a kid. Write something about me.
So definitely one of the more surreal moments of my career, put it that way.
Yeah, and it very much became like really a viral video kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is there what kind of any lessons you took away from that? Do you Do you have have you spoken to Gundy in the years since then? As far as in any stories you've had to cover?
Yeah, so I mean, I still cover Oklahoma State. The way we do our columns during football season, it's about a 50-50 split in terms of the games I cover and the games our other columnists will cover. So I'm up in Stillwater, for half the Saturday, or I'm with wherever the team is for about half the Saturdays during football season. Which usually, if you're covering a game, that means you're at least once during that week you're going to either Stillwater for Oklahoma State or Norman for Oklahoma, and gathering information for columns and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm regularly, in Stillwater at Oklahoma State, covering games, covering practice, in press conferences, all those sorts of things. And I think that a lot of people think that, well, media and coaches, have a buddy relationship, and that's not really true these days. So I preface what I'm going to say by saying that, I've never, I think there was a day in time, maybe really truly back in the old days, where, you had coaches and media reporters that were very chummy, if you will. But I don't think those relationships are the norm now by any stretch. There's just so much money and pressure on coaches that I think that there's definitely more of a wall. So I think pretty much anytime you're talking about the relationship between reporter and coach, you're talking about, is it a professional working relationship? And I would say today I have a professional working relationship with Mike, much in the same way I do with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, or the basketball coaches at the two universities, Billy Donovan, the Thunder coach. Definitely some of the coaches are are able, when it's not sort of question and answer time, to be more personable. Mike Boynton is the basketball coach at Oklahoma State, and he is very, very much a man of the people. I mean, he is very easy to chat with. When I see him, we'll strike up a conversation. Lon Kruger, the basketball coach at Oklahoma, is similar. So I think that there's definitely, sort of more conversational moments happening with different coaches than other coaches. Some coaches are a little bit more, sort of put them behind the podium, microphone. They're going to be their persona, and they're not going to drop that until they're back with their team. They're not doing it all with the media. So I think that, I have a good working relationship with Mike. He's gone on to have great success. They've had fantastic teams during his tenure, most successful football coach ever at Oklahoma State. And I've continued doing what I'm doing, about to be in Oklahoma for 20 years, covering sports here. So we've continued on to have that professional relationship. It was a weird moment, and I didn't alter what I was doing in terms of my coverage of Oklahoma State. I would hope that people could go back and look and see that I was still there that season. I was still talking to people in the program, still writing about them in an objective way. So I hope that I continued to just do my job. That was my intention at the time. And I think in a lot of ways, that was probably his intention, to get on about his job too. So it definitely is one of those, road signs along the way. But I think probably as much as anything, you're going to have to write. Sometimes you have to write stuff, as you mentioned before, Evan. You're going to have to write stuff that's controversial from time to time. I think what was interesting about that situation, among a lot of things, but what was interesting was, before the rant, I think I had gotten maybe half a dozen emails about the column that I had written, which is, I don't know. I mean, like, that's not a ton. Lots of times on game days, people are very much focused on getting to games, and you don't get a lot of feedback on columns. So it was probably in the normal range. And pretty much, I think with the exception of maybe one email, the emails that I got were positive in terms of, thanks for trying to explain what was going on here, why the quarterback switch is happening, those sorts of things. People basically saying, they appreciated the effort to try to figure out, what was going on here. And so to go from, pretty normal reaction, maybe even on the positive side, to that moment in that press conference, that was probably as much off-putting for me as anything, just sort of I did not see that coming aspect of things, which I suppose you can never totally see that sort of thing coming, but that was definitely a big part of it for me too.
Jenni, I just wanted to, move to maybe a slightly happier topic. Do you have any other notable stories in your career that you want to talk about?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a great question. I think about stories that have, again, what I mentioned before, stories that sort of resonate beyond the sports side of things. I think those are the things that to me are really the ones that stand out. And I don't know if there's any like couple that I could mention. My memory's bad in that regard, but I had a chance a couple years ago to tell the story of a family that was very into martial arts. They have 2 kids and got the kids involved, and the parent, I think the dad, also got involved, and so really sort of into while not a mainstream sports community, obviously the martial arts community is a segment of the sports and recreation of our area. And so through that, they were part of a 4th of July parade, celebration float, and all sorts of other stuff. And in the course of that parade a few years ago, the son in the family actually got killed. He fell off a float and ended up, he was run over. And so a tragedy for sure. I mean, not anything that they ever, you never think, oh my gosh, we're going to go to this 4th of July parade and something, that tragic is going to happen. And, but, they were part of that through their martial arts school. And then this, same sort of this group that this tragedy unfortunately came out of was in the group that rallied around them. And so I had a chance to meet with the family and tell their story. And it was about a year after the accident. So they hadn't done any interviews with anybody, but I had contacted them through, I think we had there was a friend I had that was friends with them or had been acquaintances with them. And so I had communicated with them shortly after the accident, just to say, I know that this email will probably go unreturned, but if at some point, any point, not this week, not this month, but at any point, if you, want to tell the story of, your son, of your family, just let me know. And basically left it at that and put it in their realm to say when that right time was, if it ever happened. And so it was about a year later that or maybe it was even 2 years later. It was not immediate by any stretch, which I didn't think it would be. Mm-hmm. But they reached back out to me and said that they were ready to have that conversation. And so the chance to share that, a story that, because of the tragic nature of it, most people in Oklahoma City, the area, knew of the story, had heard about their son. And so for them to get to share, what they how they came through that, how they continue to try to remember his memory, all those sorts of things. I mean, that was so meaningful to them. And I think, unfortunately, people lose loved ones in unfortunate ways all the time. And so a chance to maybe give readers, something that also went beyond, what they were maybe expecting to see that day. Maybe there was some strength in that they could draw. So, I think that those are the types of things that, something unexpected. I always, like I said before, I always try to give readers something they're not going to get anywhere else. And, that's sort of a fighting spirit in a lot of ways, but I really think that's important to do things that aren't maybe expected by the readers all the time and tell those type of stories. So that one comes to mind because I know I know how much trust the family had to put in me to tell that story. That's a very obviously touchy and delicate situation that I totally, while I don't understand what they've been through, I understand that delicate nature of things and their emotions. So, I heard from them after. We've been in contact since, and I think they appreciated that they did it. I think they were grateful of the way I handled things. So that was really important for me as well. So I think that all of that sort of tiles up. Those are the sorts of things that when I think about it, they stand out pretty big.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, some of the pioneers, the women that came before you in sports that you have always looked up to. When it comes
Yeah.
to as a writer, are there any writers that you've always kind of, looked up to or have provided inspiration to you as far as like your writing style or anything like that?
Yeah, I think unfortunately I should probably get a couple of books of his, but Gary Smith is somebody that I always love to read. SI writer, and I don't get SI anymore, unfortunately. I know they're still around because I know some of the people that work for him, and they do great work. But
Sure.
yeah, his. I mean, he. If you want to be. I mean, basically every time I read
Yeah.
something Gary wrote, it was like I was crying at some point during during the story. Just those sorts of things that, really, again, those heartstrings that go beyond, zone defenses and tackling dummies and boxing out for rebounds. I think those are the type of things that, for me resonate as a reader. And then you talk about how they resonate more broadly. I mean, I just think those are the type of things that I couldn't get enough of as a reader. Unfortunately, the stories that Gary Smith wrote were, I mean, the amount of, detail and time and effort that went into him. He didn't write, but about once every 3 months. And so when I got that Sports Illustrated and I opened up the table of contents and there was a Gary Smith story in there, it was like, Christmas had come and it was time to, put everything else to the side and read that story. And yeah, just
Right. Right.
unbelievable stuff. And I think that, there are little things that you pick up. I think, again, I mentioned this before, the eyes and ears. And I think, obviously when you're starting out in media, it's a lot about sports media, especially. It's a lot about statistics and numbers and what did the coach say and what did the star of the game say and all that sort of stuff. And while that's important, it's important to have numbers. It's important to have those quotes and that feedback from those people that are involved with the game. I think as you get more comfortable in the profession, and more mature in your writing, you're able to use not just, what you see on a stat sheet or what somebody says to you, but what do you see? What do you sense? What do you hear? What maybe said not in an interview setting, but what do you see or hear? I remember it's been probably I don't know if it's been a decade, but it's been a minute. Oklahoma State, obviously huge in-state rivals here. Football is kind of where it all comes together in the biggest ways. And several years ago, I was down on the field right at the end of the game because writers aren't allowed on the field until the very end of the game. And it just so happened when I was down there, and I always, when I'm on the field, I try to soak in as much as I can, just in case there's some detail that I'm able to use in my column. And it just so happened when we were down there for this Bedlam game, Oklahoma had won, and I think won pretty handily. And the defensive coordinator at the time, right towards the end of the game, he steps out on the field, like takes, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 steps on the field, looks across at the Oklahoma State sideline bench on the other side, and kind of does a whole, you want some more, like, he's patting on his chest and waving his hands, and that's not something that he was going to say in a press conference. Like, he's not going to stand up and say, all right, Oklahoma State, you want more of this? But in that moment, which was just a very real moment, he does that. Well, that becomes my lead because that's the kind of scene that I saw other people may not have seen, but it happened right in front of me. And so to trust your eyes and your ears and those other senses to then use that in your writing, I think that's one of those lessons that, I remember sort of seeing and gleaning as I went and reading a writer like Gary Smith, that, it wasn't just what somebody told him or what he saw in some sort of, box score. It was, okay, what does this house feel like? What does this room look like? What's this person doing? I think those are the type of things that, can really add the life to the stories that you're writing. Even those on deadline, you can oftentimes find just that little nugget that becomes the life that is your story. So I think that's a really valuable lesson that I learned. And that's the type of writing that we all aspire to. That's like, you want to read that. That's a novel. That's a book that you want to crawl in and you want to love. So why not aspire to bring that life to, that 700 word story that you're writing on deadline for tomorrow. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but if you can aspire to it, boy, all the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jenni, that was excellent advice. Do you have any other advice you'd want to share with young people who want to go into sports journalism, and maybe young women in particular?
Well, I think first and foremost, you gotta be willing to work hard in this business. And, I think that, we all have sort of that pie in the sky dream of what we want to do in sports media. You want to cover the NFL, you want to cover this certain team, or work for this certain entity. Like, I get that. I think those are great things to have, but I think it's important to remember that there are steps along the way. And so it might be that while, one day you might want to, do commentary for ABC for their, NBA games, and that's great. But it might be that the first step is you've got to do radio for your high school football team, or you've got to take a job in a, small city and do, small college basketball games, or whatever. I think that there are steps to get there. And I think appreciating that, each step along the way is going to hold value, that you're going to get to learn something and grow. And if you see those as opportunities and not some sort of like roadblock between you and that dream job, I think that's really important. I always tried to, and I still do, always try to take, if there's an assignment, cover an XYZ game or event or whatever, don't see that as like, well, why do I have to go cover rodeo? Or why do I have to, what this high school football game, why would I be excited about that? Everybody out there is excited to be there. Everybody out there is, has a story. I think it's my job, if I am sent somewhere that's maybe off the beaten path, is to figure out, what is that great story that's hiding out here? To not see it as some sort of, woe is me moment, but to figure out, what's the great story here, and how do I go get it? And how do I bring that to life? And how do I make it so next time when this assignment rolls around, everybody is saying, hey, can I do that this year? Like, I want to go cover that event because of the stories that are out there. And so to me, there are stories everywhere, because everybody has a story. It's just up to us to figure out, what those stories are, to uncover them, to get people talking, to have an eye for the unexpected, to be looking for something that might not seem like the norm. I did a story a few years back about this older couple. I think they were in their 80s or so at the time, who at Thunder games, they became like the closers on the Kiss Cam. Every time they did, the Kiss Cam promotion up on the big screen, and they'd show people unexpected, couples, and then, they'd be expected to kiss on camera or whatever. But at the end, if this couple was there, which they weren't at every game, but when they were the last couple on the screen. And it was always like people were waiting to see, and nobody knew who this couple was. I say nobody, but people at large didn't know their story. And so I decided I wanted to tell the story of the Kiss Cam couple. And so went and, with the Thunder's help, got their names, their phone number, told their story. It was an unbelievable story, backstory to, why they ended up with the tickets where they did, and what it meant to sort of be that final vision on the Kiss Cam. So, looking for things that maybe nobody else is thinking about, doing that story. I think that's always a good, powerful lesson to have when you're not just when you're starting out, but throughout your career. But I think it can definitely come in handy when you're first getting your feet wet in the profession.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. Well, Jenni, this has been an awesome conversation. We can't thank you enough for joining us today. And so thank you very much. And
Yeah.
good luck going forward.
Thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate it. Again, student media is where it all started for me. So I can't thank you guys enough for allowing me to come on and maybe pass along some inspiration, some hope to people that young people that might be just getting started. That maybe they just thought it'd be fun to do yearbook or do their student media, but maybe it's the start of something that takes them amazing places and into a career that lasts for a really long time.